Before we begin today, we're gonna just recall some of the concepts that we went through last week, right? And that's simple interest and then compound interest. But before we move on to compound interest, we're gonna just talk about simple interest. Anybody recalls the formula to calculate simple interest? Formula to calculate simple interest. Anybody can recall what it is?
Principal times rate times time over 100.
That's right. All right. And that's given that the rate is in percentage, right? Because sorry, that's given that the rate is as a fraction. Because you could represent the rate as a decimal as well, and you wouldn't need to put it over 100. But yes, Soraya, you're correct. Simple interest. To find the simple interest, we do principal by rate by time. Soraya, what is the principal? What does P, the principal, stand for? Or what does it represent? When I say the principal, what is the principal? Or
The
anybody, doesn't have
amount,
to be Soraya. The amount of what? Because all of this has amounts, right? Because we
of
have
money
different types of the amount of money when? The original amount of money,
before you pay back
that's right. Well, it's the original amount
the
of money that you borrowed, correct? Right? So the principal, it's not spelled like this. Sorry, I spelled it wrong. It's spelled like this, actually, I think. Who knows? Anyway, the principal is the initial amount of money borrowed or invested, right? So the initial amount of money that is borrowed or invested, right? Borrowed if it is a loan, invested if it's an investment. The rate is your interest rate. So this is the rate that you use to calculate the interest. And it is calculated typically for simple interest, it is calculated per annum. What does per annum mean, guys? When they say something is like 10% per annum, what does per annum mean?
per year.
Per year, correct. So per annum means per year. And so the time T in the simple interest formula represents the amount of time in years, right? So the amount of time in years. So that means if you have a loan for 9 months, you have to represent that 9 months in terms of a year. All right. So that's simple interest, right? Now, simple interest is not what the banks use when they are calculating interest, sadly. Because if it was, then you would just have to pay interest on one amount, which is the principal balance, right? So, for example, let's just see this in an example. Let's say Casper borrows $20,000. So Casper borrows 20,000 at an interest rate of 18% per annum. That's really high. At 18% per annum, right? For 3 years. If I needed to calculate the interest that he would pay on this loan of $20,000 at a rate of 18% for 3 years, guys, which value here is the principal?
The 20,000.
Yeah, the 20,000 is your principal. Your rate is 18% and your time is 3 years. So we apply the formula. Simple interest is equal to principal by rate by time all over 100. And that would be, well, we substitute our values in there, right? So it will be 20,000 times the rate, which is 18%, times the time, which is 3 years, all over 100. Calculate that for me, please. Tell me what you get. 20,000 times 18 times 3, all divided by 100. Anybody calculated it yet? Hi, Faith. Good evening. Nice to see you, honey. Anybody calculated it? 20,000 times 18 times 3.
10,000, wait. Yeah, 10,800.
Right. So the interest that Casper will have to pay back on his loan of $20,000 will be 10,800. So the total amount that he would have to pay at the end of the 3 years will be the principal plus the interest. So that would be 20,000 plus 10,800, which is a lot, right? So he's gonna have to pay back $30,800, even though he only borrowed $20,000. So this is why it is important when you'll get older and if you're taking a loan to really ask and be sure about what is the interest that you will be paying back, because sometimes the amount of interest that you're paying back on a loan is almost the equivalent of the loan itself, right? So that's how the banks and the financial institutions make money off of interest. Right, so that's simple interest, and you can rearrange that formula to make any of these the subject. So you could rearrange the simple interest formula to make the principal the subject or the rate or the time, right? So, for example, if you wanted to make, let's see that. So simple interest is equal to principal by rate by time all over 100. If I wanted to make time the subject, so if I wanted to find t instead, well, I'll multiply the simple interest by 100 and I'll divide that by principal times rate, and that would give me the time. And that's so for both principal and rate. So if I wanted to make principal the subject, I'll do the same thing because I'll move 100 to the other side, which means I have to multiply it. And then I will divide by the product of the rate and time. And it is the same for the rate. If I wanted to find the rate, I'll multiply simple interest by 100 divided by principal times time. Now, we would have done this when we were doing changing the subject for the formula. We use this formula actually. All right, so that is your simple interest. Last week, we also looked at something else called compound interest. Compound interest, and this is the one that banks use. So compound interest is better than simple interest for investments, worse for loans, right? So if we're looking at compound interest, the difference between, anybody could tell me, what is the difference between compound interest and simple interest? Anybody remembers what's the difference between compound interest and simple interest? By the way, the formula, yes, tell me.
So when you're doing simple interest, you just find like for that like the total, and then for compound interest, you find per year. So the principal changes every time when you calculate the interest per year.
That's correct. Very good. So this is the formula for compound interest, right? Where A is the total amount that you have to pay, right? So A is the total amount that you will be paying at the end of the period. P is still your principal, so the same principal. R is rate, and T is time in years, right? And we are just assuming that the number of times that the interest is compounding here is once a year. And if it's once a year, this is the formula, right? Now, if it was compounding more than once a year, which means that if the interest was being calculated like twice for the year or something, then we use this formula, P by R. P by 1 plus R over N raised to the power of T, N times T, where N is the number of times interest is compounded. But if N is 1, right? So if interest is compounded once a year, then N will be 1, and this will just be R over 1, which is R, right? So that's why for the purpose of your level and the kind of questions you're gonna get, this is the formula that you would see. And thankfully, that formula is given to you, as you will see when we do some questions, right? So with compound interest, as Zara just explained, the interest is calculated on the principal, the new principal balance at the end of every year. So for instance, with simple interest, right? If I was calculating the simple interest on, let's say, a principal of 10,000, right, at a rate of 10% for 2 years, right? With simple interest, I will just do P by R by T over 100, and that will give me the amount of interest, the total amount of interest I have to repay after 2 years. But with compound interest, interest is calculated at the end of each year. So for year one, you would have 10,000 times 10%, 10% of 10,000, right? Which is $1,000. All right. And this would be the amount of interest for year one. So the new principal at the end of year one, right, will be equal to 10,000 plus 1,000. And that means for year two, the amount of interest that will be the principal that the interest will be calculated on is this new value here, which is 11,000. So you'll do 11,000 times 10%, right? Which is 1,100. So at the end of year two, the new principal will be what you started year two with, which is 11,000 plus 1,100, which is now 12,100. So that's the difference when you're using compound interest versus simple interest. So that was just to refresh your memory a little bit on simple interest and compound interest. Now we are going to look at some questions. And this first question here was taken from the NCSE paper from 2014. It says Mrs. Gift puts $7,200 in a fixed deposit account, earning simple interest at a rate of 8% per annum for 7 years. Calculate the interest earned on her investment. Okay, Safira, are you there? Not hearing Safira. Okay. Um, Josh? Josh, are you there, love? Is your mic working?
Yeah.
So,
Yes, miss.
Josh, what is the principle in this question?
Hold on. It would be 8% of 7.2, 7.2 thousand.
No, I'm not asking you to calculate anything. I'm just asking you what is the principle. So you know how simple interest is equal to principal by rate by time. I want to know what's the principal, which value in that question represents the principal. Soraya, let's help Josh a little bit. Soraya, what is the principal in this question?
7,200.
Yes. So, Josh, the principal is the amount of money that you're borrowing, right? Or the amount of money, in this case, that you're investing. So, the principal here is 7,200. Right, Josh?
Yes, miss.
Soraya, what is the rate?
8%.
Yep, 8%. And then the time is 7 years. So, Soraya, can you calculate for me? Do you have a calculator with you?
Yeah.
Can you calculate this for me? What is the interest earned on the investment? Everybody else calculate it as well, but Sarah, I would like you to tell me the answer, please. So we're doing 7,200 or 7,200, as you said, times 8 times 7, all divided by 100. Did you get the answers yet, Soraya?
Miss, I got
7,200.
4,032.
Yes, that's correct. Everybody else got that?
Yes, miss.
$4,032 is the answer. All right. Good. So that would be the interest in on her investment. Now, what is the total amount she will receive? Total amount she will receive from her investment. Faith, are you there? Is Faith there?
Yes, miss.
Faith, how would I calculate the total amount of money she'll receive?
Miss, you add the interest to the principal.
That's right. Do it for me, please. The total amount, as Faith said, will be the principal plus the interest. So our principal here was 7,200 and the interest is $4,032. Yeah, Faith, what you got?
$11,323.
I think you meant 11,232. Is that what you meant? Or did I do something wrong?
Yeah,
Yeah, 11,232.
yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Okay, so Mary invests 12,000 at a bank, which pays 3% simple interest. After a certain number of years, the total amount of money she receives is $15,240. So she invested 12,000. She received 15,240 the after her investment. So that's the total amount she received, and the interest was 3%. Matthias, what is the principal in this question?
The principal is $12,000.
Right, and then the amount is 15,240. Matt, do you know how we would find the interest that she got?
Um,
Because if this is the total amount of money she received, right? She received 15,240 and she only invested 12,000, then can you calculate the interest from that, from those two pieces of information? Matt?
I mean, I kind of confused. I don't understand.
Well, okay. If remember, right, to find the total amount, if we look up here, right, to find the total amount of money, you would add the principal to the interest, right? So if I instead have the total amount and the principal, and I need to find the interest, based on this statement here, that the total amount is equal to principal plus interest, how then would I find interest if I have the total amount and the principal? Math.
You have to,
So she invested 12,000, that's her principal, and she received the total amount that she received is $15,240.
oh, you
So
have
if
to
I,
take it away.
that's right, you'd have to take it away. Why?
So you can find how much she made or
Well, to find the
got.
interest, because the interest is the difference in the amount she invested and the total amount she received. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, man.
Because if you invested if Mary invested $12,000 and then at the end of the period she got $15,240, that includes the interest, right? So that
Yeah,
extra money that she got there will be the interest that she got on the investment. So interest, if I were to manipulate this formula, total amount equals principal plus interest, and I want to make interest the subject, well, I'll minus principal from amount, right? So interest is
yeah, I understand this.
great. Amount takeaway principal. Can you tell me what the answer is, love?
$3,240.
Correct. Beautiful. So the answer is $3,240, as Matt said. Okay, good. And now it says after a certain number of years, the total, sorry, we read that already. Calculate the number of years in which Mary invested her money at the bank. So now we need to use the formula for simple interest, and we need to make the number of years, which is time, the subject. Zara, do you know how we would do that? To make time the subject, because we need to find the number of years she invested.
Wait, hold on, let me think.
Well, all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to write back the formula, right? Simple interest is equal to principal times rate times time all over 100. And I want to make time the subject.
So to find time, it would be simple interest by 100 over principal by rates.
That's right. So I will do simple interest times 100 divided by principal times rate. So Zara, what's the simple interest here?
The simple interest is 12,000. Wait, oh, it's 3,240.
Correct. And then the principal is the 12,000. And what's the rate?
The rate is 3%.
That's right. So I will do 3,240 times 100 divided by 12,000 times 3. All right. What would that be? Let's see. 3,240 times 100 divided by 12,000 times 3. Tell me what you got, okay, Zara? If I'm working it out, I will cancel these zeros. And that would be 324 over 36. I got 9.
Me too.
Good. So the answer is 9 years. Wonderful. Okay, guys, now let's do a CXC question. So this question here actually came from this year's paper, January 2026 paper. It says Alana and Brentnell share 17,400 in the ratio Alana to Brentnell being 8 to 7. Show that Alana receives $9,280. So you have to show that. That means you have to show the calculation. Guys, I don't know if you all have done proportion before, but the ratio 8 to 7 means that the total number of shares that this money is divided into is 8 plus 7 shares, which is 15 shares. And out of the 15 shares, Alana receives 8 of them and Brentnell receives 7 of them. I personally find that whenever I'm doing ratios, I like to think of it in terms of shares and then in terms of fractions, right? So if something is shared in the ratio of 8 to 7, I'm gonna use a different color. Yeah. If it's shared in the ratio of 8 to 7, it means that the total shares, right? Total shares is equal to 8 plus 7, which is 15. And then I'm able to interpret the ratio better. So therefore, so for part 1, Alana receives 8 out of 15 shares, right? Which is the same as saying 8 over 15 of the total money, which is 17,400. So the amount of money Alana receives is 8 over 15 times 17,400. And then you check that on your calculator and it should be 9,280. So 8 over 15 times 17,400. And it is correct. It is $9,280. So when you show it, you write QED, and that literally means that you've shown that it is so, right? So that's one way that you could interpret it. The next way is that you could have calculated, well, if you know that the total shares is 15, then you could find out how much is one share worth by dividing 17,400 by 15, right? So that's another way you could have looked at it. 17,400 divided by 15, which will be $1,160. And then you multiply that by 8, and that will give you the same $9,280. So that's another way that you can look, you could interpret that ratio question. All right. Next is the next part of this question says Alana invests her share of money. So she's going to invest this 9,280 into a business venture, earning simple interest at a rate of 4.5% per annum. She receives $2,088 in interest. Determine the number of years that she invested her money. So we are required to find, just like the last question that Zara and I just worked through, we are required to find, RTF means required to find the time. All right, so let's go back up here because Sarah just showed us how to do this one. So to find time, we would manipulate the formula to make time the subject. So to find time, we do simple interest times 100 and divide that by the principal times rate. So Zara, I want you to help me again with this question since you just did it with me. Tell me, what is the simple interest here?
The simple interest is 2,880.
Right, that's the interest. What's the principal?
The principal, is that No, 9,280.
Yes, correct. Because that's her share of the money. Her share of the money was 9,280. Yeah. So that'll be 9,280. And then the rate is
4.5.
4.5. Good. So now we work this out on your calculators. You do 2088 times 100, which will be 208,800 all over 9280 times 4.5, which is 41,760. So then this will give me 208,800 divided by 41760, and that gives me 5 years. So the amount of time that she took, the number of years that she invested her money is 5 years. All right, guys, and this was an actual CXC question. This was from this year, as I said. All right, let's look at one more, and then we're going to take a break and get into wages today. All right, so this question is from May 2025. Okay, so Soraya, I want you to do the first part with me, right? It says Miranda earns $8,316 per month. She spends 4/7 of her earnings on utility bills, food, and personal items, and she saves the remainder. What percentage of her monthly salary does she save? Soraya, how do you think we would do that part? To find out the percentage of her monthly salary that she saves.
We find these we find 4/7 of 18 18,316.
8,306. Okay, and then what?
And then minus it.
Okay, that's definitely one way you could do it. And then you could change, and then you would find what percentage of her salary that is, right? Because it says she saves the remainder. But Soraya, if she spends 4/7 on bills, food, and personal items, and she saves the rest, what fraction is she saving if she spends 4/7 and saves the remainder? What fraction would that remainder represent?
3/7.
3/7, correct. So you can actually just change 3/7 to a percentage, and that will give you the answer as well, which is shorter, right? So her savings is equal to 3/7. So the percentage saved will be 3/7 times 100/1, and that gives me 3/7 times 100 on your calculator. You will get 42 and 6/7 percentage. Right? And I prefer if you write it as a fraction. Even though you can write it as a decimal, it's going to be, you'll have to round it off to like 2 decimal places. But this would be the exact value here, right? 42 and 6/7%. All right, the next part of the question says the portion of her earnings spent on utility bills, food, and personal items is divided in the ratio 5:3:4, respectively. Calculate the amount of money she spends on personal items. So it says again that the portion on utility bills, food, and personal items is divided in the ratio 5:3:4, respectively. What that means, respectively, means it is in that order. So 5 of the shares goes to utility bills, 3 of the shares goes to food, and 4 of the shares goes to personal items. All right. So then we first need to know what is the amount of money dedicated to all of those things. All right. It tells us that she spends 4/7 of her earnings on those three items. So to calculate the amount of money that she would spend on all of that, we would have to find 4/7. That's the first thing we would have to do, is find 4/7 of that money, which is 8316. So we're gonna do 4/7 times 8316. And that would give me 4/7 times 8316, which is 4,752. So this is the amount of money. This is the amount of money spent on utility bills, food and personal items, in that order. I'm writing this in that order because the ratio is given in that order. All right. So $4,752 is spent on utility bills, food, and personal items. All right. And now the ratio that they told us is 5 to 3 to 4, right? So utility bills to food to personal items is 5 to 3 to 4. All right. And we need to find out, we are required to find the amount spent on personal items. Can anybody tell me how would you find the amount spent on personal items? This is the total amount spent on all three things: utility bills, food, and personal items. And we just need to find the amount spent on personal items. Anybody has any clue how we would do that from the ratio? And from knowing the ratio, yes, tell me, honey.
Miss, you add up all the ratios and you put personal item and you make it a fraction and you
That's
just
right.
multiply that by the total.
Great. Tell me then, what will be the total shares?
It would be the 4,752.
Right. And then in terms of the, how would I find out the denominator then for the fraction of personal items?
5 plus 3 plus 4.
That's right. How much is that?
12.
12. So then personal items is what fraction is personal items?
4/12 or 1/3.
That's right, my girl. 4/12 or 1/3. And then I multiply that by
4,752.
correct. 4,752. How much is that? I got 1,584. Did you get that? See? Did you
Yeah.
get this? Yeah, perfect. So that's the answer, and that's for 2 marks. And now the next part of the question says that Miranda saves the same amount of money each month. Show that her annual savings from her earnings is $42,768. So she saves the same amount of money each month. In order to show that her annual savings from her earnings is 42,768, well, first we need to know how much she saves, right? Now, guys, if we know the amount of money that she saves each month, how would we find out how much she saves in a year? By doing what? If you know the amount she saves in 1 month, how would you calculate the amount that she saves in a whole year? We'll multiply by 12. But first thing that we need to do is to find out the amount of money she saves per month, right? So there are 2 ways to do it. We could either find 42 and 6/7% of the $8,316 per month, or we can do or we could just 3/7 as well, which might be easier. Or we could take away the amount spent on utility bills, food and personal items from 8,316. So you have all those different ways to find out how much she saves, right? So let's do her savings in 1 month. So savings for 1 month, savings for 1 month will be equal to 3/7 times 8,316. Because remember, that's the fraction that she saves, right? So 3/7 times 8,316 is 3,564. And so the annual savings, therefore, annual savings will be equal to, as Zara just told us, you have to multiply that number by 12 because you have 12 months in a year. So 3,564 times 12 is equal to $42,768. And that is what we had to show, right? We had to show that. So we write QED since we have shown this. And then the next part of the question, the final part of the question, is your compound interest question. It says she invests the $42,768 in her credit union, which pays compound interest of 5% per annum. What is the total interest earned after 2 years? So you can actually multiply this by, you could just substitute it into the formula and get your answer, or you could do it like find how much interest in the first year and then find it in the second year. But I want to show you all today how to use the formula. Okay, and this is the final amount. The question is only asking us for the interest. So once you know the final amount and you know the principal, Matthias, how do we find the interest again? If we know what's the total amount and the principal, how would we find the interest?
The minus it.
Yes, we'll minus. All right, so let's go ahead and substitute the values into the principal. Good. So the principal here is her savings, right? So her principal is equal to 42,768. The rate is 5%, and the time, well, in this case is N, right? So the time N is equal to 2 years. Right, so now we have everything that we need to use that formula that was given. So like I told you, most times they give you the formula, right? So they gave us the formula here. Hold on, let me just put it side by side so I could write it over. Right, so this is A is equal to, and A is the total amount, your principal by 1 plus the rate over 100, all raised to the power of N. Good. On your calculators now, we're going to substitute these values in there. So the principal is 4,2,768 times 1 plus the rate, which is 5 over 100, raised to the power of 2. So you can type this in directly like this on your calculator. Here's how you do it. You press 42768, open brackets, 1 plus 5 over 100, close brackets, squared. And you will get a decimal, which is 4,000. Well, thankfully, it's 2 decimal places, so you don't even need to round off anything. It'll be 47,000, sorry, $151.72. So this is the total amount of money she would receive after 2 years. So in order to find the total interest like Matthias just told us, the interest will be equal to the amount minus the principal, which in this case, the amount is $47,151.72. Take away the principal, which is $42,768. So we taking away now 42768, and you'll get $4,383.72. So there you go. So guys, this was an actual CXE question from the year 2020. What year? Let me see. I can't remember. 2025. So last year. All right. So as you can see, you can already do some CXE questions, right? With your level of Form 3 Math, you can already do some CXE questions. I'm going to save this. I will post this to our Google Classroom. I'd like you all to either print it out or write it out in your notebooks, please, the question and the working. I'm going to stop here and take a break for the while.